goal that day was to talk about the experience of covering a big event like this, and hoping that someday, because we said if you're going to be in this business for any amount of time, you're going to end up covering a big event, be it a plane crash, a shooting like they had in Roseburg, or a standoff like this, or something. And we hope that by recounting the experiences that these folks had, in this case, might be helpful to you down the road. You never know. And so I've talked with each of these folks previous to tonight, and they all bring unique experiences to the table from what happened over there for 42 days. This is Samantha White. She's 1/4 of the newsroom, or the entire paper at Burns?
1/5 of the entire paper.
It's a weekly, and she's a 4th generation Burns resident. She graduated from the University of Oregon, is now back in town, and I've asked her to talk, because when we visited, she can bring a unique perspective on covering this thing happening in her town on a weekly paper with slim resources. So I'm going to have her chat about that. This is Wanda Moore, who is a television reporter for KTVZ in Bend, and she was involved in the coverage for several weeks. Next to her is Amanda Peacher, who is a reporter-producer for the Oregon Public Broadcasting, based in Bend, and she also is going to talk about nuts and bolts of the coverage. Next to her is John Sepulvado, who is the weekend edition host of OPB, and who had doings with the Bundys down in Las Vegas when he was there, and he brings a unique perspective on the Bundys, so he's going to focus on that. And then Les Zaitz, who I've known and worked with for more than 40 years, and I feel is the best reporter that I've ever worked with. And he's going to offer the unique perspective, because he lives on a ranch outside of John Day, of covering something like this and organizing the coverage from the perspective of the Portland newspaper, but also in his own community. And as most of you probably are aware, he's been on the receiving end of a lot of hate from the county sheriff in Grant County, his county, and others, and it has not been pretty. And so I think from that, we're going to talk 10 or 15 minutes with each. I'm just going to kind of lead them on, and then we'll open it up for questions from you folks. So if you have something really, you just can't wait, raise your hand, but I'd just like to kind of keep the narrative going, okay? So Samantha, when we talked, you told me about Burns, and I don't think many of these folks here really know Burns like you do. What's it like to be in Burns and work on a newspaper in Burns?
Well, like I said, we have a staff of 5, and on our whole paper, we do everything from, I go take the notes of the site, take my own photos, I go back and I write the story, I work the photos, I get it all ready to go, and we actually design our own pages, and then we send it to Bend, and the Bend Bulletin prints it, and we have a guy who drives over in the middle of the night and picks it up from Bend, and then they deliver it out to our communities. So we do everything, very small. We're owned by 2 people who have lived in our community for decades. One's our high school football coach, and the other works for the Chamber of Commerce. I've known them my whole life. I've known my editor my whole life. I grew up down the street from him. I played with his kids. They're about my age, so we're very small. Everybody knows everybody. If you come to our town and you're not from our town, we know immediately because we have never seen you before. Our grocery store, Safeway, is our social hub. That's where you go to hang out, meet people, see what's going on, get all the news. I mean, I'd love to say that they get the news from us, but you get it from Safeway. We're very small. It's not unusual to see someone park their horse in the parking lot of Safeway. I see lawnmowers parked there. But I love it. It's, you know everybody. If your car breaks down, someone is there the second. Before you even know what's wrong, they're there helping you fix it. It's just a family, a big family.
Talk about your isolation.
Well, we're 130 miles from either Bend or Ontario, Oregon, so we say the nearest corporate, place, like Walmart, Starbucks, whatever. We measure our distance in hours though, so we're 2 hours in both directions, or if you're going to John Day, it's about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, depending on if you drive a speed limit. So we're very far away from everything else. You have to be resourceful, you have to be interdependent. When I was a kid, I had braces, so we'd have to drive to Bend just to get your braces tightened. Or if you want a pair of shoes, or you want a prom dress, or anything. I mean, we are used to driving 2 hours to get anything. And if you know someone who's going to Costco, you have a list for them to stock up for like this season.
So there you are out 130 miles from anywhere, and in early November, Eamon Bundy comes to town and visits with your editor.
Yes. He came in. I wasn't really involved in the conversation, which already made me nervous because my editor and I do everything together, and we just shout at each other in the same room all day. So it's like, when someone says, I want to talk to your editor only, it already made us kind of nervous. But he talked with our editor, kind of shared his gripes with we ran a press release about the Hammonds resentencing, and he didn't like how it was covered, but we just ran a press release. But anyway, we gave him the opportunity to run a letter to the editor, which he did, and then we got to meet him again later, and he wasn't as friendly. He actually organized a meeting in our community in December, and we decided not to cover it, but we had one of our owners went and kind of scoped it out, and the next day Ammon came back, and he grossly exaggerated the number of local people who were there. He said that there were like 100 and some people, which for our community would be like a lot, like we would notice. So there were actually probably more realistically by our owner's count, like 20 to 30 maybe local people at most. So he came in, he'd already kind of like lied to our editor about how many people were there. And then he brought in this multiple page document that he wanted us to publish, and my editor said, we're going to want to look at this, we're going to have to pare it down, this is really long. And he immediately became very defensive, and he said, now I know where you stand. And he said, you're not the only news organization, around, and I'm going to go find someone with a longer reach. So right then and there, we realized that this guy has an agenda. He wants to use us for a particular purpose that we don't really particularly appreciate. And we're absolutely not going to give him a platform. We are not going to let this guy get his message out because it's going to be harmful to our community. We had already heard stories about people being followed around in the grocery store, kids being followed home from school. It was a very unsettling and troubling and scary time for us, but we didn't report on it because people asked us not to. And, we don't report things we hear through the grapevine. If someone says, I'm telling you this as a friend, we're not going to report it in our paper. We know everybody. They're our friends too. You can't really separate people from, they're not just a story. They're someone you're going to see again every single day for the rest of your life.
So on January 2nd, and so with that as a backdrop, comes January 2nd, where the rally and the march was held, and people were marching right past your apartment, you said?
Yeah, I took photos of the rally from my front porch.
What did it feel like?
It was very scary. It was just unsettling. Like, the people during the rally were very friendly and nice and very quiet. But just not knowing what was going to happen it was nerve-wracking. It's like, what are they going to do? We were kind of prepared for anything to happen, and
And gun-carrying strangers?
Gun-carrying strangers walking through your, right past your house. And I have no problem with guns. We grew up around them. My dad has a closet full of them, but he doesn't carry them on the side of his hip, and walk down the street. So that's a different scenario.
So they were intimidating?
They were I would say, yeah, they were intimidating. The people in the rally were actually pretty polite, but it was intimidating.
So could you get a sense of what their purpose was by watching this?
They're very anti-government. You got that sense for sure. What they wanted to accomplish, we weren't sure at that time.
And so you continued through that week having dealings with them, keeping an eye on them, and you were still wary, and the paper was still wary?
Right. Well, we had heard, we knew that the rally was going to happen, and we actually put a little message in the paper the week before, because we're weekly, so we have to do everything the week before, just to let people know that, they're going to be going through town, they're going to be congregating at Safeway, so might not want to go shopping right then, or whatever. And then, then we heard about the occupation. I actually heard about it on Facebook, that the occupation had happened. So,
Talk about that and how, once you learned, you and your editor in the paper learned of the occupation.
so I read it on Facebook, and it's like, you know, that's not really the most reliable sources. I read it off of like we have these little like forums, which are like groups on Facebook, where it's mostly to like organize Costco runs and sell things and like stuff like that. But someone posted a cell phone video that she had taken of Ammon at the refuge, and so we're like, oh gosh. And so I wasn't really sure. I knew we weren't going to go out there. We already decided we're not giving Ammon a platform. We're not following him out there. We're not going to do that. But I wasn't really sure what was going on, and so I went to get some dinner that night, and the local county commissioner, Pete Reynolds, owns a pizza place. So I just talked to him, and he confirmed it, that it was really going on. And in that moment, it was just like, I'm a community member. I'm scared for my family. I'm scared for my friends. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who these people are and what they're doing. So yeah, it was just a very emotional and scary time. I was really not thinking about work at all in that time.
And what would have that done to the newspaper's resources if you or somebody had been dispatched down there to?
It would have been completely impossible, because our newsroom is me and my editor. So that would have been one person putting the entire newspaper together by themselves. So it wouldn't have even been feasible if we wanted to do it, but we already knew just philosophically that we weren't going to do it.
And so when we finished our conversation, I asked you, what's it like in Burns now? After these guys are here in our town, or I guess they're in Nevada now, in custody. But what's it like?
I think on the surface, it seems normal. It seems people are trying to be very friendly. They're trying to kind of maintain a status quo because we know that we need to. But underneath, I mean, there's a lot of suspicion. People are kind of like, oh, you know, I think this guy stood on this side of the fence, and I think this guy was over here. So it's like people are nervous to do business with each other. People are nervous to patronize each other's businesses, I think. I mean, and then there are other people who are just trying to kind of be very supportive and do everything. But there's a lot of wounds underneath the surface that no one's really addressing quite yet. I think that's it's kind of an unspoken thing that we're just, let's try to maintain right now. So, I mean, that's my evaluation of it. Maybe that's not accurate, but I think that...
Well, you were there.
Yeah.
You lived there.
At least that's how I feel personally, from being a citizen.
So Wanda Moore has had an interesting career so far, and I've asked her to document it. You've been in Ben 2 years, 3 years?
2.5 years.
Could you go through where you
Sure, yeah. So I'm originally born and raised in Germany. I then went to the University of London to study there, then went to New York to get my master's in journalism at Columbia. Then I worked there for NBC News for a little bit. Then I moved to Maui, where I worked for a little while. And then, I got the job in Bend and moved over to Central Oregon.
And you do just a lot of daily news reporting.
Yes. And we're relatively small staff, of course, compared to here at KTW or like the bigger stations here in Portland.
So, talk about the day when you heard all this was started.
Well, we've been kind of following that, Ammon Bundy and militia, or supposedly in Harney County. So then when the rally was scheduled for the Hammonds, we decided to drive over there and do the story. So we're about 3 hours from the refuge, from Bend to the refuge. So yeah, we drove out there and covered the rally, and that was, we finished that. We then went to the Dairy Queen and edited our package there and sent it back and did all of that good stuff. And then we were like, okay, we're about to drive back when we heard, well, something's happening at the refuge. We think, people have taken over the refuge. So we decided, of course, let's drive over there. At this point, it's pitch black. It's 7 degrees outside. And we decided to drive out there and didn't really know what to expect.
How long was the drive?
It's about half an hour.
Okay.
And we didn't really know. All we heard is a group of armed men had taken over the building, so we didn't know, would they be friendly? Did they want us there, or are they going to be not so friendly, so it was me and my photographer, and we drove out there kind of discussing like our exit strategy in case they are not friendly and don't want us there. So we drive up and there's a bunch of pickup trucks just blocking off the entrance. And there's this guy just guarding everything, and he looks more like he's supposed to be in a war zone in Afghanistan rather than in Burns. And so we roll down the window, we say we're with KTVZ, and he's like, well, do you have an appointment with Ammon? And I'm like, I didn't know we could make appointments. I didn't know that was an option. So he never gave his real name. He only introduced himself as Fluffy Unicorn. There was nothing fluffy about him, but he had the words game over tattooed on his eyelids, because when he dies, it's game over. So, so then yeah, he said, okay, I'm gonna get Ammon and he's gonna come out and talk to you. So yeah, we grabbed an interview with him and filmed like the people around the campfire with the guns and all that good stuff. And at that point, they did not allow us to go anywhere on the refuge headquarters. So we were only allowed to film that portion. And then we drove back, and on our way back, I filed. Yeah, to Bend, and I filed the footage to CNN and NBC and everyone. Yeah, so that was the first night.
And so that first week, you were doing a lot of back and forth, and that's a 3-hour drive each way?
Yep. So that was a long week. It was a very long week because we would do live shots and then so for the 6 o'clock news, and then drive back while, again, like, you know, doing editing on the computer on the way back and filing video to all the big guys. So.
Yeah, so you had responsibility for your own station, but who also were you feeding?
CNN, NBC, Fox. Yeah.
Okay. You told me something really interesting in this, and I'm just going to share it, that unfortunately we all know how to cover a shooting, but there was no textbook for this.
No, I feel like that was for me the interesting part, because with Roseburg, you know, we all kind of know, like, okay, here's the drill, we know what to do, where to go. This was a little bit more, wait, what's happening? This is very strange and unusual, the whole story itself. And then I felt like, you know, in terms of knowing what's next, well, you didn't know. You didn't know how long this occupation is going to last. You didn't know what was going to happen each and every day. It was like every day was kind of a surprise. They were like, okay, field trip, let's take down a fence, or let's take down a camera from the FBI. So it was very much like not knowing what's going to happen.
And you did this for how many days back and forth?
Oh God, I don't even know. I guess around like 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
So the first week we did every day back and forth, and then we were like, okay, let's not go every day, but then we're like, well, we should go back today though. So it just, yeah, we went back a lot.
And what was it, did you have reaction from your viewers on your coverage?
Yeah, very split. I think in Portland it's a little bit more to like against the occupation, and in Central Oregon it's very split. So kind of similar than what you see in Harney County or in Grant County.
Speaking of Grant County, did you ever have any dealings with the Grant County Sheriff?
We did, yeah. We also went over to John Day to cover what was happening over there a little bit, and we grabbed a quick interview with him. He first said he didn't want to talk to us, but then we talked to him in the parking lot and talked to him there real quick. So the interesting part there for me was really to see, you know, we've covered so many community meetings in Harney County, and then to see that, like, we covered the community meeting there as well, to see that the community was equally split on this, and that it kind of did the same thing, like, tore this community apart in both counties. So for us, Deschutes County, well, it's really not at the surface, because we didn't have a sheriff involved, or we didn't have the occupation. But yeah, I think it's something that you can see in a lot of counties.
And you also had demand from all around the country, from CNN and all those folks, to feed them until they presumably landed.
Yeah, so, and that's the other thing about, like, you could even see that hesitation with the national news, you know, when it comes to knowing what to do. So I feel like with mass shootings, well, you know they're going to be there, like, the minute after it happens. Well, this was like, they didn't come there the next day, like, kind of took a little bit. So whenever we drove back, we were, like, wondering, like, if we're going to go to the refuge, is there going to be, like, everyone there? And it was like, not yet, not yet. So it was, you could tell that even the big how to approach this and what you do with this.
Well, and they dealt with the Bundys too down in Las Vegas or in Nevada a couple of years before, and it wasn't always photogenic, which they need. Amanda, your experience was a bit different. You're based in Bend, you cover Central Oregon, environmental stuff. What was it like when you got into this thing?
Well, I think there was a lot of uncertainty in our newsroom for how long this was going to last. We knew early on that Bundy was in town. We had some conversations in our newsroom about what level of coverage would be appropriate. So we decided to cover the rally. I actually did a story in advance of that January 2nd rally before they took over the refuge. So we had the sense that this was something big, but no one knew exactly what it would turn into. So as soon as, I actually wasn't there the day of the January 2nd rally, but as soon as we learned that the occupation had taken place, I was grabbing my camping gear and every piece of equipment from the office. My husband packed a little snack bag for me. So we just didn't know what this was going to turn into. And so coming at probably 1 or 2 in the morning that night and showing up at the refuge first light the next morning to try to get a sense for who these people were and what their intentions were now that we knew that this was going to be immediately a national story.
What did you do that first day? You show up, it's colder than hell. How did you approach that first day?
Well, that first day, the occupiers, none of them were giving their real names. So I knew that people were going to be interested in this story from across the nation. I just immediately started taking photos and tweeting of everything I saw. So, a truck shows up with supplies, and I took a photo of the hiking boots and the fuel that was in there, and that was a little anecdote that was immediately usable not only by our newsroom, but spread on social media and helped inform the national audience for what was going into the refuge. Just trying to get conversations with the few occupiers who were hanging around. They were saying over and over again, well, only Ammon will talk. Only Ammon is the spokesperson. But it was cold, and they were bored, and you could sidle up to them and be like, well, what brought you here? And they actually wanted to talk about a lot of things. They usually wanted to talk about the Constitution, but if you could veer them into a bit more personal direction, there was a lot there. So that first day, like Wanda, I was kind of expecting the CNN swarm, but it was just maybe 6 or 7 of us, and Ammon gave a long press conference and said that they were planning to be there and turning over the land back to the local citizens, and actually gave us a tour of the refuge. They had put away their guns by then. They were very careful about demonstrating that this was supposedly a nonviolent event. So you didn't see any of the military-style rifles out. Lavoy Finicum gave us a personal tour of each building to demonstrate that, well, not at each building, I should say, but took us to the museum and said, all the artifacts are still here. Kind of slipped up about telling us that they had got a stack of keys from somewhere, and that's why none of the windows and the doors were broken. I remember seeing Les at that moment, and both of us kind of looking and taking down that note real everyone is wondering, how did they get in? So they were very specific about being super friendly to the media and saying all along this was peaceful, but they were going to be there for the long haul.
And what was the ordeal like for you? You lived 3 hours away in Bend, but you were there every day, but you weren't commuting. So talk about the logistics of your job for the...
Well, I think everyone at this table could say we probably worked anywhere between 12 and sometimes 22-hour days every day that we were there. It's just extremely intense the entire time. So I actually stayed in Burns. We kind of took over this cute little bed and breakfast, which was an absolute haven over the other local motels. Although, I think there's the Best Western is great too, but we were loving having this little bed and breakfast to stay at. So I tried to get to the refuge, I would say almost every day, because I saw a big part of my role in being one of the local journalists there, consistently on the scene. OPB would bring in another journalist cycled in and out regularly, but I was there for 5 or 6 days at a time, the entire time. So having that regular presence at the refuge allowed me to see what was changing, who was coming and going, what kind of head count were we looking at, how many people from other states were filtering in. I noticed that they built a road and was able to break that story. I noticed that they were just doing projects and doing things on the refuge. So just spending quite a lot of time there to gather information and put it out, because there was a lot of curiosity about what they were actually doing there on the ground. And then at the same time, really trying to keep mindful that this story was so important to the community, and that their reaction to the occupation and often suffering because of it was just as important, if not more important, of a story to tell. So while the occupiers were providing breaking news every day, pretty much, and having press conferences that we could report on, this ongoing tone of angst and tension in the community was not that same level of daily headlines. So we had to keep on remembering to go back and say, let's check in with this community member, and let's remember to reflect on how this is playing out in the community of Burns, because that's very important to our statewide audience.
And even though you were out there by yourself for OPB, talk about what was happening back here in Portland and your daily give and take with them, and John's role too, in recognizing the importance of it.
Well, we had 2 people actually on the ground most of the time. Every once in a while I was here solo, but so 2 reporters on the ground, and then we had a team of editors and digital staff that we were able to feed. Sometimes it was just tweets and a phone conversation that they would put into a story. You know, sometimes we had 15 or 20 minutes notice, we're gonna go live to you on the air with this update that we know you have. So we had a whole network of people. I make us sound like a big newsroom, we're not that big of a newsroom. But we had really skilled editors at home who were keeping up with what was happening on the ground, but also monitoring the Bundy Ranch Facebook page, seeing what kind of leads we're getting on Twitter, and a lot of false tips on Twitter. I was talking with John pretty much every day, because he, as you'll hear, was super smart about who the Bundys were and what we might expect from them. So we had a lot of communication back and forth, and I think that being in the middle of that occupation was definitely a different perspective than being able to see, because I wasn't reading other newspapers, I wasn't looking at what the New York Times was writing, I was just reporting all day, every day. So having a bigger perspective to inform that reporting was helpful.
And tell me about your experience with the Grant County Sheriff.
Well, I think like Wanda, I didn't actually get access to the sheriff until after the occupation ended. So he was already not especially friendly with media at that point. I did call him during the occupation because I got a couple of tips about his relevance to the occupation, but he was not interested in talking to me then. Done a couple stories, he's still not interested in talking to me now, but I think that's kind of expected with where he's landed in all of this.
OPB has really amped up its newsroom. Hired Anna Griffin from the Oregonian to be the news director. Jeff Mates is now their political reporter. What do you think that this coverage and experience did for OPB in the newsroom and around the state?
Well, I think for a long time we've been ramping up to be more of a breaking news organization. We've been known for providing in-depth radio stories, sound-rich features, context and analysis, but I think with this story we stepped up to demonstrate that we can be an equal player along with the other newsrooms in the state to keep up with the coverage and often be the first ones to a story or the first ones to a certain angle. So we have been beefing up with, I will say, other staffers besides those we fortunately got from the Oregonian. But I think we're entering the stage on a different level and still keeping up that level of context and analysis that I think our audience appreciates. And also becoming just as important, having our online presence be just as important as our radio presence. This story was not a platform-specific story, and I think we recognized that early on. We would be online, on the air, on social, and wherever we needed to be at the moment for whatever was breaking.
So John, you were down in Las Vegas a couple of years ago when the Bundys did what they did down there. Talk about how you got to know them and what you were doing there, and then come to this one?
Sure. I guess, I just want to add something to Amanda, and then I'll get to what you're saying.
Okay.
Cool. I think that watching our newsroom become more confident each day because we were doing so well with the coverage. And I feel, and this is with all due respect to everyone else, I feel that we saw the power of providing context in real time while we were breaking the news. Amanda's road story is a good example of that. And I want to do one more thing too, just for posterity's sake, because it is being recorded. The social media aspect, there were a lot of bad tips, but there were a lot of fucking good ones too. And there was one in particular about Lavoy Finicum. I would not have been able to get the story about him being paid $150,000 for foster care if it wasn't for a Twitter tip, who found a document I was looking for before I did, and I was looking for something similar. So I don't think that this story would have played out the same way if it was not for social media. I think that if we would have kept it to radio, and as we used to, and Les would have kept it to the paper, and Wanda would have kept it to TV, and we would have waited for the week. Well, you guys did a good job of not covering it, and I'm being honest about that. Like, they did a really good job of that. I don't think it would have been the same story. I don't think it would have gotten the same attraction. And that segues into what you were talking about, because 2 years before, the first Bundy 1 was not really covered that way. Bundy 1 was still covered in the traditional platform for the most part. Now, people did tweet about it, but there was bad cell service in Bunkerville. And in fact, the only thing that really kind of happened in any respect social media is when, with regards to Bundy 1, is when Cliven said the thing he said about Negroes. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that statement, which just cratered the support that the Bundys had built. And that didn't even happen on social media. That happened through the New York Times website. So we saw the actual, not just the evolution of OPB's newsroom, but we saw the evolution of kind of hitting that digital stride that we've been hearing about for so many years. And what's cool about it is we got to do it